Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Everyday Night. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jeff.
And Jeff, it occurred to me that one of the things we could talk about that relates to the virtues is the idea of fair play, and what that means. Um, in and it's common throughout a lot of different spheres, both in games and certainly in politics. And yesterday was the election, and a lot of that has been on my mind. So the idea of what constitutes fair play, what is fair, and how does that relate to the virtues? And so I thought
Well,
that's what we would talk about.
all right. Sounds good. I think that I was having a discussion with somebody recently, and it might be good to bring in the concept of sportsmanship into
Sure.
this discussion. They're
And
they're related.
I think we have talked about sportsmanship before, and I think it is definitely related. I think in terms of sportsmanship, we've talked about that sense of fair play as a part of sportsmanship. I don't know that we've particularly applied it to some of the aspects of non-game play
Right.
situations outside of sport. And I think that it's relevant because we talk about how the virtues apply to modern life, and that's what
Right.
we're talking about. So,
Sure. And
okay,
I mean, this we can get into the ideas of gentlemen's agreements and a lot of those things are around the concept of fair play.
yeah, that was the title of Gregory Peck movie, Gentleman's Agreement,
Hmm.
which was about anti-Semitism.
Huh.
That
Interesting.
he was a journalist who pretended to be Jewish,
Hmm.
and then wrote about the result in the movie. And he was suddenly, he wasn't allowed in the country club, and he wasn't allowed in various places. And this was in the 50s, I think, maybe early 60s. It could have even been, no, I think it was the 50s. And but it wasn't anything wasn't written down. It was a gentleman's agreement that
Right.
Jews were excluded, right? So
Hmm.
um so that gentleman's agreement, it was there was a bit of irony in that because
Oh yeah.
it was not very gentlemanly.
No, exactly. No,
So
precisely.
yeah.
But this is where, well, before we begin, though, I'm going to ask you what you're drinking.
Ah, well, I have my magic semi-disappearing glass. This is a rosé, California rosé, from the Castello de Amorosa, which
Oh,
is a winery started by a member of the Satui family, which is another winery, and he built it. It's about 20 years ago. Um, it resembles a Tuscan castle,
hmm.
and it's a
Okay.
beautiful place. We've been there a couple times, and he specializes in Italian style wines, and they're really good. This is a rosé they call Gioia, and it's quite good.
Nice,
So,
nice color.
yeah, it's lovely, and I find that I tend to prefer, keep this where I can we can see it here. Tend to prefer Italian style rosés because they're more robust. I've had
Okay.
some French rosés which are good, but some of them tend to be so subtle that they tend to disappear. They tend to towards invisibility. There's just way too subtle. The Italian rosés are more robust. What, and pray tell,
Well,
what
I just have
beverage
a
are you indulging in this evening?
Woodinville straight bourbon whiskey,
What kind?
and it's a Woodinville
Woodenville. Okay.
straight bourbon. Um, it's very nice. It's a lot of caramel flavor, which I like. A little bit of smoke. Um, but it's a 90 proof. straight bourbon whiskey, and there's no flavoring or anything in it. It's just a nice sipping whiskey. So
Nice. Well, salute.
of course, I prefer mine a little on the rocks. It opens it up a little bit.
Yep, sure.
So,
So,
fair play and the gentleman's agreement. We talk about fair play in terms of sportsmanship in relating to a game,
right.
any sort of game or contest.
Yes. And the idea of it being fair, a fair set of rules, means that prowess is the determining factor, right? Prowess,
Yes,
also fortitude.
In a contest, yes.
In a contest, prowess and fortitude, right? In a game, a contest, a sport.
Right, but trying to apply it to politics is a little different.
Yes.
And I think the argument here is that it's all part of the game. So and this is, I'm not agreeing, I'm just putting up the argument that I've heard that it's kind of like all's fair in love and war sort of thing.
All's fair in love and war and politics. I've heard it extended to that.
Right.
And I fundamentally disagree with that. I don't think all is fair in love or war or politics. I think that dishonesty in interpersonal relationships, i.e., love, dishonesty is unfair. Catfishing, if you've heard of that,
yeah, sure,
or any of the other kinds of deceits. The was popular probably 10, 20 years ago was the how to pick up women.
Oh yeah,
experts and that sort of thing. And there was a lot of lying in that. And no, so I don't think that's fair. There are rules of war. There are such things as war crimes. So all is not fair.
Right, but
either.
But there aren't any rules in politics. There's nobody set down and saying you're not allowed. I mean, there are laws, certainly,
yes.
that are supposed to make the political process equitable. Which fair, equitable, are those the same thing?
Well, and that's a good question. I would say that there are things in politics that are legal but are not fair and are not ethical.
We can talk about finance then too.
Yes, campaign finance, I think, is
not just campaign financing. I mean finance.
Yes.
Al Capone said that why would I be a crook when there are so many legal ways to make a dishonest living?
So, well, and having worked in advertising and marketing and having taught it for a long time, there are rules about what you can and cannot say legally in advertising, except for political advertising. And there's political advertising that is it's misrepresentation to the point of dishonesty.
Yes,
and
agreed.
I consider that to be a violation of my ethical standards of fair play. And it's one of the reasons that so many people get turned off to politics. And it's not just the commercial television commercials, radio commercials, mailers, that out and out lie about things. And it's not illegal. There's no truth in advertising in politics. And I think that's a problem. There's also something called a push poll, and that's like a telephone poll that asks leading questions. So the idea is not to solicit opinions, it's to influence opinions. Well, so it's not really a poll.
It's to provide a specific statistic to support a position.
And also to influence the people that are being asked this. the robocalls, the false robocalls. Those are actually illegal. But there are things that are legal that I think violate the idea of fair play.
Well, there's so much of that I think is probably tied up in First Amendment litigation.
Well, I think that setting aside even the speech issues, there are other things like so cheating is not only done by violating the rules, which in some, like certain kinds of misrepresentation can be cheating, can be violating the laws governing elections, but also changing the rules to favor one side
Yes,
are not necessarily illegal,
right,
can be legal, but certainly are not fair and are not ethical. And the one that comes to mind is gerrymandering.
right. But this again is what I think of the argument from the side that has been most effective in gerrymandering is that no, if it's not illegal, it's part of the game.
Um, yes, but the because something is legal does not mean it's ethical, and that is a problem with the legal system and the code of laws that we have.
Well,
Can you, I mean, it's a larger philosophical question, can you legislate ethics? And I'm not talking about morality, I'm talking about ethics.
right.
um so I know gerrymandering is legal. I know that in some places there are independent
Yeah.
redistricting commissions to keep it more fair. I know that in some places, but in some places, gerrymandering is still being used so that the the number of elected officials from one party outnumbers the other, even though the electorate is not divided that way. It's not representing the electorate. The politicians are choosing the voters instead of the voters
Yes.
choosing the politicians.
Right. And let me be clear. I absolutely am in agreement. And to
Mm.
me, the saying that uh, even though I'm pointing it out, saying that, well, it's all part of the game. It's not illegal, and ethics aren't a question. As long as it's legal, it's allowed, and therefore, within the bounds of the game. But I consider that to be a hypocrisy.
I agree. I think in addition to hypocrisy, there's also what usually comes up is a whataboutism. Well, the other side does it too.
Right.
Well, that doesn't make it right. That doesn't make it
Correct.
right.
Then let's make sure that nobody can do it.
Exactly.
Well, I don't know if we need to go that far,
Exactly.
because as long as I can still have a chance to get advantage by it, I'm going to want that on the playing table.
Right.
And that's the
So
hypocrisy. That to me,
that
that's where the
right
hypocrisy
there,
comes in.
yes. So I think there are other areas when we're talking about politics. Um, it is common these days when some candidates lose an election, or even before the election, to start claiming voter fraud.
Yeah.
Well, if I'll accept it if the results if I win, and if I don't, it obviously was voter fraud.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, more hypocrisy. Voter fraud, individual voter fraud, like voter impersonation, casting multiple votes, that
Right.
sort of thing, that's extremely rare,
Oh yeah, vanishingly rare.
vanishingly rare. Electoral fraud or election fraud methods are so common and that they're done in plain sight.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also changing the rules in order to win. It's a form of cheating. It's a violation of fair play. I consider it a violation of fair play and a violation of the chivalric virtues of honesty and justice.
Yes.
And
Agreed.
things like the well, as you mentioned, gerrymandering, disenfranchisement. So limiting the number of voting locations
Yeah. Drop boxes
or
or
drop boxes, locating voting locations and voting equipment in favorable districts and limiting them in
yeah.
unfavorable areas, placing the polling places in areas that are hard to get to, or things to limit the number of votes.
Right. The idea of not allowing ballots to be collected, making it illegal to collect ballots and by in lots
Right,
to submit
right,
them
right,
to help people who have mobility issues or
right.
can't take time off of work to go vote or whatever.
I I think I think election day should be a national holiday,
I
personally.
think I think we should have an election week,
Excellent.
and you can pick any one of those days to go vote. That
I've
would
been,
reduce numbers, that would reduce waiting in line, all of that. You just
yep,
go on a
and
day.
for and that's done in a number of countries.
Hmm.
Um, I actually prefer filling out an absentee ballot, which I can do, and then taking it and putting it in a drop box,
Yep.
because I can then, because when I would, as much as I enjoy the going to a polling place, I take my notes with me
Yep.
about who I'm going to vote for. I've studied it, I've decided, and I've written it down. And then I essentially have to transfer that
Right.
to the ballot while I'm there. And that takes time because I want to do it accurately. I don't want to make a mistake. And but I don't want to hold people up because I know,
Right.
you know.
Right.
So I like doing it this way. Um there's also voter intimidation.
Yep.
There were cases of um, men in um,
Tactical gear.
tactical gear outside drop boxes
Right.
for ballots, sitting on their pickup truck, right, and intended to intimidate people.
Just
Um,
exactly the kind of stuff that the Department of Justice was designed to stop
exactly,
in the
exactly,
South.
exactly. Well, and speaking of that, um, there used to be tests that
Hmm.
black people had to take that white people didn't have to take in the South in order to disqualify for them from voting. That's illegal, but so are poll taxes. A poll tax was you have to pay a fee to be able to vote.
Right.
Well, a voter ID, and again, the instances of individual voter fraud, someone voting under a
Right.
false name or something, very few cases, and no successful ones because the people doing it get caught. But so the whole voter ID law solving a solution for a problem that doesn't exist. But if they limit the kinds of identification that will be accepted to something that you have to pay a fee for, that is a de facto poll tax.
I agree.
And that's also
I,
changing the game in order to gain an advantage.
yes. I believe that if a state is requiring a state issued ID to vote, then the state must provide a valid ID for free.
I
It doesn't
agree.
have, if you want it to be, if you want to pay a fee for a driver's license, okay. But to just get a state issued picture identification,
Yes.
that should be absolutely free. All you should have to prove your residency with a bill or something. Now, I don't know how to deal with homelessness in that
Yeah.
case.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's not, those are issues.
right.
But they're issues that could be dealt with if we approach the issue collectively and honestly, finding a solution to it.
Well, and if the uh, um, motive is to make sure it's the motive, we have to switch the motive. The motive has to be, how can we make sure that the most possible people get to vote, not how do we make sure nobody's voting that shouldn't.
Exactly. Yeah. And the the I I'm blanking on his name, but it's a famous audio tape of a guy talking about um how their party does better when fewer people vote,
Oh,
and wanting, therefore wanting to limit the number of people who vote. Um there are other things like confusing ballots or ballots that, the way, say, ballot initiatives are written,
mm-hmm.
can be confusing or leading. The the I think that was one of the issues with Brexit in England, um, in Great Britain, where, or the United Kingdom. I'm trying to
Yeah,
remember that, where um, there were people who were confused about what yes meant and what no meant.
right.
Um, and uh, so there's um, fortunately, miscounting of ballots or so-called ballot stuffing or um, electoral fraud on the level of tampering with machines or counts or that sort of thing, that's really rare also. So it's really in that, it's not the individual voter and it's not the counting machines and all of
Right.
that. It's in these other, a combination of these other uh, cheating in plain sight kinds of techniques that are legal but are not fair
Well, yeah,
play.
it's that's the thing. It's we're not talking about, they're all legal, and it's bending the rules to provide a particular outcome
Yes,
one way or another.
yes.
And it is,
Uh,
and I absolutely agree that it is unethical. But until we make it illegal, there's nothing to
until we make
fix.
it illegal, people will do it. Um, I think that the Citizens United that allowed
Oh, yep,
unlimited spending
yep,
uh, on campaigns by people not identifying themselves, by
right,
organizations not identifying themselves, that absolutely should be done away with, as should the idea of corporate personhood.
yeah.
Um, because those I think, it irritates me when I hear um, uh, people who claim to be originalists in their interpretation of the Constitution, which um, I think is bullshit anyway. But then talking about corporate personhood, because Thomas Jefferson said that, and I think some of the early rules of corporations were that every corporation had to dissolve after 7 years and then reform.
Yeah, right.
So, um, so um, those are just some of the issues. Again, I come back to some of the advertising because I would require, if it were up to me, which it isn't, but truth in advertising, in and how do you do that? You know,
Well,
how
we
do you,
were for several years we were um you don't find fact checkers running a ticker tape under Joe Biden the
Don't need
way,
to really much,
well,
but I wouldn't
I
mind it.
wouldn't
I
think
would
so.
like it because,
Sure.
yeah, there are no politicians who don't exaggerate to make themselves look better.
Right. Or, I mean, it's the nature of the endeavor to cast yourself in the best possible light.
Yes,
I get that. But I'm saying we have say we have the technology, you know. Um, we
well,
used to
when you're
have, now, I mean, say 40 years ago, we didn't have the capability to fact check in real time a politician's speech.
yes,
We could do it now. We've done
I
it. I mean, it's obviously been demonstrated, and I think it would make for genuine a genuine reputable news organization could do that.
I think it's a terrific. And when you're one of the challenges is when a politician engages in a rhetorical technique called a gish gallop. And the gish gallop is when the claim upon claim upon claim upon claim so quickly that by
Right.
the time you dissect and analyze and debunk the first piece of bullshit, they're already on number 27.
Right.
And it takes there's it's related to Brandolides bullshit asymmetry principle that it takes much longer to um, refute bullshit than it does to say it, and that's
Mhm.
the asymmetry. But I think, yeah, a fact checking in real time, that could help. The problem is also then if the public's not paying attention, or and this gets into other issues, but it really is an issue of fair play too. If people's access to information is limited, which sounds like an odd thing to say
In this day
in
and age,
in this
certainly.
day and age, but it's certainly true that people self-limit their
Yes.
sources of information, and that's problematic. Um, when people do that because they're only getting sources of information that are presenting one side of an issue and often completely invalid, erroneous, deceitful, misrepresentative kinds of information, not merely
Right.
interpretation, but they're presenting it as news and blurring the lines between news and opinion. So,
That's something I wish the FCC would, well, the FCC, our legal system has not caught up with our technology at this point.
that's true.
Online internet. Now, and this was uh, freedom of, not a freedom of, the, what was it, the internet? What was it called? The
Oh, the one that said the internet
internet
care.
neutrality, right? The
Well, net neutrality
net
is
neutrality.
is a different thing. That's that um service to quality of internet service can't be based on fees paid, essentially.
Yeah, but there
So
was more
that,
to it than that.
yes, but I think what you're talking about is the idea that an an internet provider is not responsible for the content that's carried on the internet
No,
that they carry.
what I'm actually talking about is individual program. I think the FCC doesn't have any control over what happens on the internet. Is a issue, whether it's an issue, whether it's a problem, we can talk about. But there's no governing body over the internet. And lots of people will tell you that they don't want one.
Right. Well,
But I
and that,
think that
yeah,
any entity on the, uh, if there was a way to do it, I would say that any internet entity who wants to call itself news in its title would have to abide by the same kind of rules that broadcast news used to.
yeah, there's certainly a notable broadcast quote unquote news organization that has news in their title that has said and had to say in court that they are not a news organization, they're an entertainment organization,
Right.
but news is in their name. I'm
And that's
talking about
where,
Fox News, of course.
and I
And
think that they should not be allowed to use news. They should have to call themselves infotainment.
right, yeah, I would agree with that. I think that certainly with Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
um, and his essentially firing of all the content moderation people there,
Yeah.
it took a big step backwards, because there was a huge spike the day he bought it, for days, huge spike in the use of the N word, the
Yeah.
anti-Semitism, attacks on LGBTQ people.
Yep.
It became just, despite him saying he didn't want it to be a hellscape free for all, that's exactly what it became.
Yeah.
And
Well, he
internet,
didn't do anything to prevent that either.
no, he didn't, because
He
he
took
was
off
so called
what few guardrails there were taken off.
right. And free speech, keeping in mind that, because people mix this up all the time, the First Amendment freedom of speech only limits the government's ability to censor speech.
Yeah.
It doesn't protect people from the consequences, the commercial consequences of their speech.
Right.
And
Well, and
people,
that's kind of that's pointed out in some ways. I mean, Elon Musk is a capitalist, and he he did what he said he was going to do, and the stock in Twitter tanked.
yes. And then he complained about it.
Right. Yeah. Well, of course, you're allowed to complain too. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a right too.
Yes.
But this is a problem I think that happens in our capitalist commercial structures, that we, in the ostensible interest of efficiency, we are reducing competition for services and goods. And
Um,
this is what's happened with Facebook and Twitter. It happens over and over again. It becomes people start to view it as a service,
but
and it's
it's
the
not,
only service.
regulated like
No,
a utility.
exactly.
So the question is then, is the internet a utility? Should it be regulated like one? Antitrust legislation, or legislative antitrust regulations and suits have only been aimed at industries that aren't the internet.
Well, yeah, that there's the internet isn't
I
a
mean,
business.
internet, social media, and internet industries that well, every business has an internet presence, but internet focused, like um, e-commerce, like an Amazon, or social media, like a Facebook or Twitter, or I mean, Twitter, Facebook bought Instagram,
Right.
and so you can cross post. Wow, isn't that convenient? But again, it's limiting the number of um, players in that
Hmm.
sphere. The internet focused businesses, the businesses that are about the
Right.
internet or social media, rather than businesses that, I mean, every business has an internet presence. So
And what
not the
amazes
same
me how
thing.
is all of the diehard capitalists, all the people that want to, that say that capitalism is freedom, don't want have to convince me that monopoly is good. if actual real capitalism allows monopoly, it would if it were if we went to a pure capitalist philosophy in our economy, we would just have these tall silos of providers for goods and services,
And it,
and they would
it's
charge whatever they wanted.
and people think of themselves as capitalists, often erroneously.
Yeah,
No, you are not a capitalist. You're an employee.
you're a consumer.
You're a consumer. You're an employee. You earn a wage. You are you are not a capitalist. You are
You generate capital for capitalists.
yes. You don't invest your capital in, no, you are human capital, right? But people say, well, I believe in the capitalist system. Well, you're not a capitalist. How many capitalists are there, actually?
Well, I've said this before. I believe in capitalism because I think capitalism is the best driver for innovation and
Regulated
regulate.
capitalism.
Yes, that's the thing.
Regulated capitalism. What actually is referred to in European countries as a social democracy.
Yeah.
And it's not socialism, it is a combination. That's what the name they have given it, social democracy, is a combination of capitalism and government services, government regulation of capitalism, but not, the government is not controlling the means of production, which is pure socialism. And that's not what that is about. And people confuse that all the time, and in political advertising, intentionally misrepresent it. We don't, you're a communist, you're a socialist, no, that's not what people are talking.
Right. Yeah.
It's complete misrepresentation.
Yeah. You hear conservatives talk about her tax and spend socialist agenda. Well, could you be more specific, sir? Because
well, yeah, the economy has, if you look at the last 50 years of U.S. political history, I think it was 50 years, no, 40 years, whereas like the administrations, Democratic and Republican administrations, about equal. In terms of number of years, the unemployment was lower, the GDP was higher, national debt went down.
Oh yeah,
all of those things under Democratic administrations much better for the economy than Republican ones, but the Republicans claim that they're better for the economy, and people believe them, and it's simply not true. It is. Well, I'm often reminded of something that I think it was Senator Moynihan said: "You're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts."
Right.
And so, if you are presenting something that is factually dishonest and you know it is, you're cheating. If it's so,
and you should be called on it.
Yes.
And there should be consequences.
Yes. People get called on it, but there are no consequences. And you can't shame somebody for hypocrisy if they have no shame. So
right. And this is, I think, our problem going forward for our whole society is too many people are convincing themselves that they are doing what's best for everyone. That by doing what's best for me and assuming that everybody else is doing the same thing, it'll all work out. We'll all get what we deserve.
That is, and that's pure Ayn Rand, objectivist, solipsistic, selfish bullshit. that you can't make a society that way.
No,
And yeah, the human evolution led, I mean, what evolution led to, and what powered evolution was collaboration
yeah,
among
right.
people. We evolved to collaborate, and damn it if there aren't some knuckle draggers who just are just all in for themselves. So
And I think I, for one, I think what we ought to do is we ought to have, we ought to create this great libertarian reservation in like the Northwest. And we just put a big 15-foot tall chain link fence. We build a wall here. Okay, here's my plan. We build a wall and we put everybody who wants to be a rugged individualist, you go one way through this door and you fight it out, or you survive however you can out there, and no government will not touch you. You could do whatever you want out there, but do not come near this wall.
wasn't
Hmm.
that the movie The Purge?
No, no, no. It's we should have um, machine gun nests and in towers, and look, here's your dream. Go out, create your own life, do it all for yourself. The government's not going to stop you. Do whatever you want. Nobody cares. Inside, this is a dark zone. Inside of here, life is cheap, and you make of it whatever you want, and that's it.
And then the president's daughter is in a plane that goes down there, and they have to find Snake Plissken and
No,
send him in there.
that was different. Escape from New York, great movie. It's a great movie. It's a little cultish, I'll give you, but um,
I have watched it and I have enjoyed it.
Kurt Russell as Snake Plissken was inspired casting, frankly.
Yes.
The barefoot computer as an action hero just warmed my heart.
and from what I've heard about Kurt Russell, he would volunteer to go into that.
And see, that's the difference in the story behind Escape from New York was they walled it off, saying they just gave up on trying to govern it or enforce law. So they walled it off, and whoever was trapped in there was just trapped in there. And then they dropped prisoners, antisocial people in there afterwards. So what I'm saying is, here, look, free land. Take as much land as you want. You go through this door armed however you like. In you go. Here's your fantasy. Here's the life you claim to want to lead. You go for it. The rest of us out here are going to cooperate to keep you inside.
Well, I think it's the basis for a movie, but it's not the basis for a solution, I don't think, but
you're right.
Well,
I didn't say it would work. I just said it's what I would do.
Well, I think in conclusion, I would say that the virtues, as we talk about them and apply them to modern life, are embedded in a sense of fair play, whether or not something is legal.
Yeah.
And I'll put it this way: if you're, do you, when you go shop, I don't mean you, I mean you generally, when you go shopping and you have a shopping cart and you take it out to your car and you unload your groceries in your car, what do you do with the shopping cart? Do you take it to the shopping cart corral? Do you take it back in the store? Or are you one of those people who just leaves it in the parking spot or leaves it kind of semi propped up on the island with the excuse that, well, I'm just giving the employee, I'm just making sure they have job security? Yeah, that's bullshit. You're just being irresponsible.
There was I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, went to Meijer, I believe it was a store, and I finished my shopping and I went out and I put my cart in the corral.
Yeah.
right? Like a responsible social citizen, right? And I saw, I mean, literally two spaces, maybe 15 feet away, was a cart sitting in an empty spot. So I just, oh heck, since I'm here, I just
Mhm.
went over and I grabbed it and I went to put it in the cart corral. And a woman right next to that spot said, "Thank you." Like, you mean this was your cart? You mean you couldn't be bothered to walk the 15 feet from your car to the, I mean, literally there was a corral,
Yeah.
an empty space, and this woman's car. That's how close she was to the cart corral. But she just left it right in the middle of the other space. Like, who's
Somebody else
breeding these
take
people?
care of it. Hmm?
Who's breeding these people?
Well, I think they escaped from that preserve. And
Maybe.
yeah.
See, we need a better wall.
Yeah. Um, okay. Well, I think we've about covered it.
Okay.
So,
I think we can end it there.
yep. Okay. So, thank you, everybody. Please like and share and send us your suggestions for topics.
Yes, please.
And until next time, be thou
A good night.
and true.